The Grand Combat Training Amphitheater of the Stellar Hegemony's Imperial Military Academy was carved from a single heat-tempered block of synthetic obsidian, designed to absorb the deafening shockwaves of 1,000-degree plasma discharges and kinetic impacts. High above the polished granite sparring pit, suspended within a tiered viewing gallery woven from dark iron and glowing holographic displays, sat Master Instructor Vrail. He was a towering, 8-foot-tall Xylarian warlord, whose triple-jointed shoulders and iridescent multi-layered chitin shimmered with the terrifying authority of 100 planetary pacification campaigns. Around him sat hundreds of aristocratic cadets from the core star systems, their expensive, silver-trimmed battle harnesses gleaming under the harsh stadium lights as they watched the morning demonstration with an air of lazy, aristocratic superiority. Down in the center of the pit, resting upon a massive pedestal of reinforced adamantium, lay the historic blades. They were not modern weapons of war. They were ancient relics salvaged from the deepest, most violent wars of the Orion Arm Massive, two-handed executioner swords forged from compressed neutron star metal, sacred battle axes infused with dormant plasma cores, and ancient kinetic broadswords that weighed upwards of 800 pounds apiece. For 10 solar cycles, the Academy had used these legendary weapons as a psychological hurdle, displaying them as proof of the insurmountable biological gap between the galaxy's ruling races and the primitive vassal species forced into servitude. Every elite cadet who tried to lift even the lightest of the blades during the annual exhibition had seen their arms buckle, their shoulder joints fracture, or their posture collapse under the crushing gravitational weight before they could even drag the hilt an inch off the pedestal. Instructor Vrail stepped forward to the edge of the viewing gallery, his 4 primary optical stalks flaring with a cold, triumphant violet luminescence as he tapped his heavy talon against the railing. A synchronized wave of absolute silence rippled through the amphitheater. Silence! Cadets! Vrail's voice boomed across the acoustic chambers with a deep, biosonic rumble that shook the dust from the high-ceiling rafters. Today, we observe the annual exhibition of the Ancestral Armory, the true standard of martial supremacy. These blades were forged for beings of unmatched muscle density, multi-chambered pulmonary systems, and hyperdense skeletal frames. Any lesser organism that attempts to harness these weapons without the genetic blessing of an apex species will have their marrow turned to powder within a microsecond. A low, grating wave of amused sniggering echoed through the tiered student benches as junior aristocrats whispered among themselves, casting smug glances down at the perimeter of the pit where the Academy's mandatory labor detail stood waiting. Among them was Cadet Marcus Vance. He didn't wear a silver-trimmed combat harness, a custom energy shield generator, or a ceremonial officer's crest. He wore a faded, oil-stained gray utility jumpsuit with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, heavy steel-toed work boots caked in dried red clay from the subterranean maintenance tunnels, and a battered canvas cap pulled low over his brow to shadow a pair of tired, bloodshot brown eyes. He was a human, a member of a newly integrated fringe species viewed by the Academy's elite as little more than soft-tissue mechanics fit only for scrubbing plasmaducts and hauling scrap metal. Marcus wasn't even paying attention to the warlord's speech. Instead, he was staring down at a greasy pocket calculator in his left hand, muttering curses under his breath while trying to calculate the load-bearing stress limits of a fractured hydraulic lift on sublevel 4. Instructor Vrail's optical stalks snapped instantly toward the scruffy human standing near the back of the labor detail, his multi-lensed arrays narrowing in sharp, unadulterated irritation at the obvious display of disrespect. "You there, human," Vrail barked, pointing a 4-inch razor claw directly at Marcus's chest. "Do you find the sacred traditions of the Imperial Armory amusing? Or are you simply incapable of comprehending the martial glory displayed before your primitive eyes?" Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't drop his calculator, and he didn't snap to attention like the other cadets. He slowly raised his head, blinked through the glaring stadium lights with profound exhaustion, and let out a long, wheezing sigh that sounded less like a military subordinate and more like a man working the tail end of a 36-hour double shift. "Look, Commander," Marcus rasped, his voice flat, dry, and dripping with soul-crushing annoyance. "My shift down in the waste recycling sector was supposed to end an hour ago, and your maintenance supervisor dragged me up here just to move this oversized junk off the floor so the cleaning drones can sweep the tiles. Can we get this over with?" A collective gasp of shock rippled through the aristocratic student gallery. Never in the history of the academy had a human, or any vassal laborer, spoken back to a master instructor with such absolute, unfiltered casualness. Instructor Vrale's chitin flushed a dark, incandescent crimson of pure rage.
Insolent, herrlich specht.
Vrale roared, his voice shaking the stadium walls as he slammed his talons onto the iron railing. You mock the weapons of the ancients. You think you could stand in this pit and even graze the hilt of a true warrior's blade? Very well. Let us test that fragile, unaugmented spine of yours. Step forward, human, and lift the sword of the obsidian titan, or be executed for treasonous insubordination on the spot. The surrounding elite cadets leaned forward over the gallery rails, their multi-lensed eyes widening with cruel anticipation as they waited for the human to be crushed into a bloody pulp beneath the 800-pound mass of the legendary weapon. Marcus let out another heavy, weary sigh, slipping his calculator into his jumpsuit pocket and rolling his shoulders until a loud, echoing pop rattled off the stone floor. He trudged slowly across the granite arena floor, his heavy work boots scraping against the polished tiles with an unhurried, agonizingly casual pace that drove the instructor completely insane. He stopped directly in front of the central adamantium pedestal, where the sword of the obsidian titan rested, a monstrous, serrated blade of dark, light-absorbing metal covered in ancient, glowing runes of power. Marcus stared down at the legendary weapon for 3 long seconds. He didn't assume a combat stance, he didn't channel psychic energy, and he didn't recite a warrior's oath. He simply reached out with his bare, grease-stained right hand, grabbed the massive two-handed hilt with a loose, relaxed grip, and heaved it upward with a casual, single-handed jerk. Ch clang. The 800-pound monument of neutron star metal didn't resist. It didn't crush his bones or pin him to the floor. It slid off the stone pedestal with a sharp metallic clatter, hoisted effortlessly into the air as if it were nothing more than a rusted iron broom handle found in a janitor's closet. Marcus hoisted the terrifying legendary blade over his shoulder, letting the massive point rest carelessly against his back while he reached up with his free hand to scratch an itchy spot behind his left ear. The entire amphitheater plunged into a dead, suffocating vacuum of sound. 300 elite aristocratic cadets froze in their seats, their jaws hanging slack, their optical sensors dilating in sheer, paralyzed disbelief. Up on the command gallery, Instructor Vrale's facial mandibles went completely limp, his 4 optical stalks flying wide apart as he stared down at the human holding the galaxy's heaviest execution blade like a toothpick. What? Vrale choked out, his voice cracking with unmitigated horror. How is your muscular structure not tearing apart? That blade requires the gravitational density of a heavy forge world to lift. Marcus blinked slowly, looking down at the massive weapon resting on his shoulder, then looked back up at the trembling warlord with an expression of profound, deeply rooted confusion. He shifted the blade slightly, listening to the internal hum of its ancient power core, before shaking his head in utter disgust. Why is this thing balanced so terribly? Marcus muttered, his raspy voice echoing effortlessly across the silent stadium. Who the hell designed the center of mass on this garbage? The pommel is hollow, the crossguard is 3 pounds too heavy on the left side, and the alloy mix has way too much carbon content. It's gonna crack the second it takes a solid impact against a kinetic shield. Did an apprentice blacksmith forge this in his garage during a lunch break? A dead, eerie stillness settled over the arena, broken only by the hum of the overhead floodlights. The galaxy's most sacred, terrifying symbol of martial supremacy had just been picked up by a tired human mechanic who immediately started critiquing its manufacturing quality like an overworked quality control inspector on an assembly line. Instructor Vrale clutched the iron railing so hard his talons cracked the metal, his mind completely failing to process the reality unfolding before him. Marcus let out another heavy sigh, hoisted the legendary blade a little higher on his shoulder, and turned toward the exit tunnel with a dismissive wave of his hand. Anyway, if you guys are done playing with your heavy metal toys, let me know when you want someone who actually knows how to weld to fix the balance on this thing. Otherwise, I'm throwing it in the scrap metal bin with the rest of the garbage.